Hello and welcome to Contending Sports, where we promised you an episode once a month, and we looked at our calendars and had to make sure that we kept that. To be fair, Dale and I were both kind of waiting for what a lot of Jazz fans have been waiting for, and that is just the shoe to drop on a possible Donovan Mitchell deal. There's been so many days where I feel like I wake up and check Twitter, and the way that everything is going, just all the talk is, okay, when is it going to happen today? When are we going to look on Twitter and see, Woj or Shams or maybe even Windhorse just like drop an absolute bomb on the sports world? And I've been stressing about it way too much for something that hasn't happened, and I'm starting to kind of think won't happen. But we'll get into that a bit later. Obviously, Kevin Durant is still in Brooklyn. Kyrie Irving as well. Westbrook is still in LA, and so frankly, since the first weekend, everything has kind of been pat in free agency and just in the NBA. So it's been a lot of smoke, but we haven't found any fire yet. So Dale, what are your thoughts? Kind of where are you sitting at, and what do you kind of want to start talking about?
Yeah, the first thing I want to say is if Donovan Mitchell does get traded, which I also want to say I don't want him to get traded. I think the Jazz's future looks better with him on the team. But if he has to get traded, I don't want him traded to the Knicks. Even if that's the best return, it might just be the small market versus big market thing. I don't want to see the Knicks start to feel like they can just take whatever talent is out there that's not in a big market all the time. And this is one where it's Donovan Mitchell's under lots of years. I would much rather, if he has to get traded to a smaller market, which I don't think Donovan Mitchell would like as much. But even Miami's probably not going to happen with the trade package that they have. But I think Donovan Mitchell may not like this initially, but I think trading him to Orlando or the Kings for Donovan Mitchell's sake, that might assuming health, those could actually be pretty fun teams to watch, and they could actually be surprisingly good teams when they kind of get some pieces around there. But first, with that said, I want him to stay on the team, and I think the Jazz have a pretty good roster. They still might need to make some moves, maybe trade like a Mike Conley, Bojan, if you can get the right package, to get some other pieces that kind of fit with a future build rather than a win now kind of mindset. And even if they trade like Mike Conley for some younger pieces and they keep Donovan Mitchell with the other pieces they have around him, you might that could be a playoff team right there. I don't think this is necessarily a tank if you keep Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, I entirely agree with that. I think that you summed it up great in one of your tweets on our Twitter, which I'm going to plug right now at Contending Sports. Please give us a follow there.
I'm more active there. Nate might hop on and comment and tweet stuff occasionally as well. So if you want to interact with us in between episodes, which are less often right now, follow us on Twitter and it'll be fun.
And if it's a bad take, it was Dale. It's all on no.
I've had some bad ones.
But someone said, I'm officially calling it, any team should go out and do whatever they can do to get Donovan Mitchell. And you just said, does that include the Jazz? And I entirely agree with that right now. And I think that's what Danny Ainge is doing, personally. I think the Knicks have a lot of assets that they can give, mainly that they have 8 first-round picks available, 4 of their own and 4 of somebody else's. And I think Danny Ainge is trying to probably get about 6 of those and have 4 of those be unprotected New York Knicks picks. And if the Knicks don't want to do that deal, he doesn't have to, by any means lower the price and say, okay, well, I'll do 4 picks, or we'll do 5 picks with 3 of yours and have them be heavily protected. Ainge doesn't need to do that. He's perfectly capable of going into the season with Donovan Mitchell and just seeing what happens. The Jazz could even go out and maybe make a trade for John Collins. He's available. Vanderbilt's awesome. You have Patrick Beverley, who again, can be a great locker room piece. There's going to be 29 teams in the NBA that hate him, and there's going to be 1 team that loves him. And currently the one team that loves him is Utah. So why not use that for as long as you can? There's a lot the Jazz can do. And yeah, they're not going to go out and compete for a top 3 seed right now. But there's so much just back and forth in the West where what if things don't mesh well in Minnesota and the T-Wolves, aren't going to be a top 9 team? What if, like, a lot of people think highly of Memphis and they think highly of Dallas, but there's so much volatility in the West that something could happen there. And again, I'm not betting on the Jazz to make the playoffs by any means right now, but there's a lot that could happen that frankly isn't happening because because of Danny Ainge. Like, why hasn't Kevin Durant been traded yet? And I'll be interested to hear what you think, Dale, but I think the reason he hasn't been traded is because of Danny Ainge. So why haven't the Jazz been able to do trades to possibly build around Mitchell? It's because the whole league is sitting here waiting for the Nets to make a trade that they're not making because the Jazz got 4 first-round picks for Rudy Gobert. So the reason that Ainge can't make a move is because of good decisions that Ainge made, but those are coming back to bite him, if you want to say, when it comes to possibly making moves to either trade Donovan Mitchell or, more likely than not, in my opinion, try to build around Donovan Mitchell.
And here's what I think Ainge is thinking. I may be wrong, who knows, but I think Ainge, when he took that trade for Gobert, he knew he inflated the market. Like, that was an incredible return. I'm still kind of sad Gobert's gone, but I've come to terms with it. I loved his time on the Jazz, but he's gone. Great return for the Jazz. I probably would have accepted the trade as well. And so now he's inflated the market. So if I'm Danny Ainge, at this point, I'm saying Donovan Mitchell's value is higher than ever before because I just inflated the market. And there are other teams that's their asking price. And for other stars like Kevin Durant, which obviously Kevin Durant is much better than Donovan Mitchell at this point, but who knows what Mitchell will turn into in 2 or 3 years. And so I'm probably thinking, if I'm going to trade him, I'm going to trade him for the same, like at the same market level that I traded Gobert at, meaning you're probably going to get more back. He's younger. He's on a long-term deal. He has more potential. So Ainge is looking at, I've inflated the market while this bubble is kind of here of all-star player trade value, which the market was already kind of increased with the Spurs to Hawks trade. There are a lot of picks exchanged there. So it's not just Danny Ainge. So the market's high. There's a lot of teams buying. The trouble, though, is this upcoming draft, there's a lot of teams tanking. So it's going to be teams are either contending for a championship or teams are tanking, kind of. That's kind of, we're going to have a weird season coming up. And so Danny Ainge is sitting there with Donovan Mitchell, where he's sitting on the fence. And if he can get the return he wants from Mitchell now, he's going to take it. But he's not going to let him go. And if the trade market deflates, goes back to kind of normal, I think Danny Ainge is keeping Mitchell, and he's looking for, because if you trade Mitchell, there's one route that you can go. You're rebuilding, and you're rebuilding through the draft. That's the only option you have. If you keep Mitchell, you have a lot of options. You have an all-star player who's going to continue to be an all-star for the rest of his career, likely, on your team. You have young players. You have tradable contracts that winning teams would want, like Bojan Bogdanovic, and you have a lot of draft picks. So now, if you keep Mitchell, you can trade him later if you get the right offer. If there's a team that thinks they're a contender and they need one more piece and they're desperate, come the trade deadline, you can trade Donovan Mitchell. If you want to keep him and you want to contend, you have draft picks, you have tradable good players, you have lots of young players that you can package together to get another star along Donovan Mitchell. You also have a lot of draft picks that you could trade for and try to set up like a short-term rebuild where you miss the playoffs this year, trade all, like, a lot of your future draft capital and players that you don't think, and like the veteran players for current draft capital and what is supposed to be a loaded draft next year. Get some good pieces, young pieces. You probably miss the playoffs the year after that. If the players develop right, you now have a good team that you can build around, make some adjustments, and make a run at a championship again. So keeping Donovan Mitchell on the team, I think, makes the best strategic sense because you have so many options and you just kind of see what hand you're dealt. So that's why we're not going to see Mitchell traded unless it's a killer deal. for the Jazz.
I entirely agree with you, right? Like Mitchell's I believe 25, going on 26, like here in the next few weeks. Super young, 3 years left on his deal, I believe, plus a player option. So I think it's 4 years left. 4 years in total left. I could be wrong on that. So right now, what superstar would you want to get? Would you want to get Donovan Mitchell, or would you want to get a significantly better player in Kevin Durant? And that's kind of hard, right? Since obviously the Nets want a great return for Durant, but he's old. He's had the really bad injury that he did seem to come back from, but he had some hamstring issues this last year. He's demanding his way out of Brooklyn, which I feel like a lot of people are conflating that with him leaving Oklahoma City and him leaving Golden State, which I understand how both of those decisions kind of put bad tastes in people's mouth. But at the same time, those came at the end of his contract. Like, I've only seen Kevin Durant, do good business when he's somewhere. Yeah, there was some bad blood in Golden State, but that didn't cause him to play poorly on the court. He didn't demand to sit on the bench. And when the contract is over, frankly, he had no obligation to either of those teams. It's not a Paul George, I'm going to demand my way out of Oklahoma City to get to the Clippers after I signed a big extension, which is what, of course, Durant's doing here. But it's not like this is the second or third time he's done it. But again, there's a lot of question marks around Durant. And while I could definitely see a team like Boston saying, hey, let's send Jaylen Brown to Brooklyn, along with some other assets to get Kevin Durant back and be the title favorite. I could see them making that decision, but I also see the decision where they say, we'll play the long game and keep Jaylen Brown. So once you kind of consider where not a lot of teams can actually use Kevin Durant because he is a win now, and I feel like the only 3 teams I can think of are Suns, Golden State, and Boston. And if a move was going to be made by the Suns, they already waited too long. And again, the same with Boston, and I don't think Golden State has any reason to mortgage their future. So after that, Donovan Mitchell's the only star available. And because of that, he's really valuable. New York is obviously the front runner. That's apparently where the conversations have been had. But the only way I see that deal happening is if New York all of a sudden starts out 5-10, just are doing absolutely terrible. Then I think all of a sudden you'll get a haul for Donovan Mitchell. And that's because of what I wanted to say took way too whatever, I'll just say it. Danny Ainge does not have to worry about his job security. Danny Ainge is, in his 70s. He's good. He already retired once. He could have a job anywhere in the NBA if he wanted to. And frankly, Ryan Smith isn't going to fire Danny Ainge. However, people in New York, the people in the New York front office have to worry about their jobs. And if New York is losing, then their employment prospects don't look too good. So that's why I think all the desperation is in New York is Ainge is playing with house money, and he'll be playing with house money throughout his entire time here at the Jazz. He's only going to make moves that he feels are necessary. He doesn't have to prove anything, and he's just going to make moves he thinks are the best, while the Knicks have to worry about other external factors.
Ainge doesn't have a timeline. The Knicks have a timeline. They just signed Jalen Brunson, and that's kind of a win now move with how much money they gave him. We'll see how that turns out, but
yeah,
it's kind of a weird situation, especially with, as you mentioned it, with the Kevin Durant situation. There's only how many teams are actually contending for a title this year? The Lakers are going to try to, but they probably won't. In the West, you're really seeing the Nuggets are really going to go for it and have a realistic option if everyone stays healthy. The Warriors and the Suns. You'll see the teams like the Mavericks try for it, but the Mavericks are kind of outside looking in. In the East, you have the Heat, the Celtics, the Sixers, the Bucks, maybe the Nets. And so you're only seeing I don't know, 6 or 7 real title contenders. Everyone else doesn't really care because of the draft. They want a decent pick. They want to get the guy they want. And we'll see how it plays out, but that's kind of a weird situation for a player like Kevin Durant. While Donovan Mitchell, he fits in with more teams that they say we don't have to win right this second. We can get a player where we'll get to the second round of this year. We'll kind of retool for the next couple of years, like adjust the roster, and then we'll get there in 2 or 3 years from now. So it's a weird situation that's going on. And that Celtics Jaylen Brown trade offer is bizarre to me.
Yeah.
If I were the Nets, I would have taken that like in a heartbeat. That gives you a pretty awesome core to build around for the future once you get rid of Kyrie.
No, it definitely does, right? And from what I heard, is that was like a month-old trade offer, just from kind of the things that I listened to and the podcasts I listened to that was leaked. And again, like I totally see the decision to keep Jaylen Brown if you're the Celtics and to not acquiesce and give up Smart and possibly more assets. But I think really in the end, the decision that Brooklyn made there was what the Jazz are doing, where they're saying, okay, we know Kevin Durant. From all accounts, he has a really good relationship with the Nets owner. We know him. We know that he's not going to sit on the bench for 82 games. We know that he's not going to pull a Kyrie Irving. We know that we'll be able to have him play. And if we have Kevin here, we're confident that Kyrie will come out and play. And hey,
how crazy of a story would it be if they just keep everyone? Ben Simmons has a career year where he becomes Defensive Player of the Year and they go win a chip. Like that would be such a weird turnaround.
And I really think what they're kind of playing on right now is not to discount how Durant feels, but I think they're saying, we think that we can wait him out. Like, we think that we can say, hey, like, we couldn't find a good deal. Sorry, like, we'll keep our ears open, but you're here for the season. Because Durant wants another chip, right? And he's running out of time. He doesn't have time just to sit around and waste. So I think there's a strong chance that you see everything just get rolled back the exact same way with the Nets, and that they're just hoping that Ben Simmons comes out and has a great year, like you said, and makes everyone feel like, okay, we can do something here. Let's keep this all together.
What would make this bizarre is if the NBA came out and made exceptions to like the Stepien rule, where you can't trade consecutive draft picks, first round draft picks, and like, hey, if he's made more than 4 first-team All-NBA teams in his career, then you can trade as many draft picks as you want for him. Then you would have teams like the Heat and the Suns just like trading away their whole future for Kevin Durant.
No, that would be interesting to see.
Just all picks in perpetuity.
Are all of the trade rules under the CBA? Or are those
I don't know how that fits in.
Okay. I mean, basically what I've learned from all the crazy stuff going on right now is that nobody understands how any of the trade stuff works in the NBA. When all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, we can't trade any max rookie extensions to the Nets for Durant. And just nobody knew that. Which, I mean, makes sense that you don't want to just all of a sudden be have teams trade away their futures like that. But I could definitely see where you're like, no, like we want to trade Adebayo. I think is probably the most likely one of those options. We want to trade Adebayo to Brooklyn and have a chance at Kevin Durant. But again, like you said, I mean, the Heat, they only have 2 picks. Like, the fact that they're in any trade conversations right now is because it's Miami. You would never hear them be like, well, the Pacers have 2 picks and a couple of good potential role players. Like, so they're in this. We should keep an eye on them.
And to be fair, they do have Hero and Robinson, which that's kind of an interesting. Well, Robinson's not as young as a lot of people think he is, because he was a rookie at like 24 or something like that. Yeah. So, but that's kind of an interesting pairing with some picks and
24 years old. Oh my gosh, he's ancient.
So old.
Oh my, like 24-year-olds. What are you doing with your lives?
And because like if you like Tyler Hero, this is kind of surprising. Mitchell kind of made up for it later in the season, but for the first half of the season, Tyler Hero coming off the bench, his numbers were really close to Donovan Mitchell's.
Yeah.
And so it's like Tyler Hero, he's not athletic, but he can put up similar numbers. He's not Mitchell athletic is what I meant to say, but he can put up kind of similar kind of numbers as that, which is kind of sneaky for if a team wants to give up that. But I don't know. The Jazz won't The Nets definitely won't. I don't know who else is out there right now. Westbrook, the Heat don't want Westbrook, so
yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, you're not giving away first round picks to get Russell Westbrook. You're trying to get the 2 Lakers first round picks.
Yeah.
Which isn't
what
even
do you
that
think
much.
About would you give up, because I saw some trades where it's like Bojan or Conley and like 2 Jazz players that are veterans or like a Jazz player who's a veteran plus a younger player for Westbrook and 2 picks. And then the Jazz just waive Westbrook because there's no way he's playing a game in Utah with his history here. Would, like, if Mitchell's traded and the Jazz go into tank mode, would you be okay with a trade like that?
Yeah, total. I mean, what would be even funnier is if the city somehow rallied behind Westbrook and like he came back and just, had a hell of a season here, and all of a sudden, like, that's just a step in just a part of the history books is that Westbrook just had a great time in Utah and somehow enjoyed it.
If Westbrook didn't have his history here, I could 100% see Jazz fans getting behind him and him just like having a Chris Paul kind of season like that, what Chris Paul had with the Thunder. But
I can't see that.
I don't know if the Jazz would want to do that though if they're tanking, because Westbrook is good enough. Just by you put him around a bunch of high schoolers, he's probably still getting you 35 wins.
Totally. Since that's what I mean, like, I never want to question his dedication, like, when he's on the court. I will always question his dedication to winning as a team. Like, he wants to win, but he wants to win with him, getting his triple-double.
He wants the right system for him to get his numbers and win.
Which, again, like, is a totally human thing to do, right? Like, I definitely want to be successful where I'm at. So I totally get that. But it definitely just makes what he does a bit less impressive. I've never known that you could get such selfish assists until I've watched Russell Westbrook play.
You just need to play like NBA 2K My Player, and then you'll learn how you get a selfish assists.
Fair enough. I would actually say that that's a trade that I could see making sense for the Lakers to give up their 2 first-round picks. That's a lot better than giving both of those up for Kyrie. I think, obviously, Kyrie is a better player than either Mike or Bojan, but I think being able to get 2 bench pieces, maybe Mike's not even a bench piece, but being able to, and maybe Bojan's not, but being able to just build out some depth and get shooting, which is something the Lakers do not have, would be a really good deal for them there.
Bojan on the Lakers is such a good fit. If I'm looking at it from the Lakers' perspective, he would be perfect next to LeBron.
But the issue is Jeannie Buss understandably does not want to give up those picks. If you want to read into some stuff on Twitter and try to look for some subtweeting, it looks like she's kind of really mad at LeBron. There's some other stuff, and I can see that. The Westbrook trade was a terrible trade. I should have stuck my flag in that mountain the second it happened. I did, but then I let everybody else who gets paid to do this say, "Oh, this is going to be so amazing," and I'm like, am I just that wrong? Like obviously you guys know what you're doing. You've been doing this for decades. Am I just that much of a Westbrook hater that this is going to be amazing? And it wasn't amazing. I look at the fact that LeBron James wants to own an NBA team, and I look at it and I'm like, if you're a hands-on owner, I don't know how any of this is going to work out well for your franchise. Like, you're one of the best basketball guys of all time. Like, your IQ is amazing. You're amazing on the court, but you're not GM material. And again, like, there's so much to respect about LeBron James. Saying that he's not GM material is by no means like me trying to insult him. Like, I've worked, like, you can't be great at everything. So it'll be interesting to see.
And it's interesting looking back at LeBron James's career, like how many comparisons there are to Michael Jordan. I think a lot of those were kind of intentional by LeBron. And if he goes and owns a team and is very hands-on, like he wants to be, the comparisons are going to continue. The good news for LeBron, though, is he kind of has a low bar as far as managing a team goes.
Fair enough. And that's the thing. Like, the Hornets aren't a great team, And obviously they're not set up for success, right? They're in a small market. There's a lot that has to go on there, but there's definitely, from what I've heard and what I haven't delved into it a lot, there's been issues with Michael Jordan not being the best owner in the world. Which again, like, just because you're great on the court doesn't mean that you're going to be great off the court in making decisions to win a championship. So it's not meant to be a slight at either of those like legends at all. I do. Yeah. Sorry, you go.
Oh yeah, it's just interesting how this skills, because like players like LeBron and LeBron's probably more of a I don't want to say better teammate, but easier to get along with teammate than Jordan was.
Yeah.
But it's like it's the personality thing that plays a role. And it's like Jordan, you've heard how he kind of crushed the spirits of a lot of young players because he just trash talked them on his Hornets team. So it's like, because that's how he motivated his teammates, but he found the right people with the right personality. So that's something that maybe he hasn't figured out quite yet, or maybe he just needs to be hands off as far as he doesn't talk to players.
I mean, I totally get the trash talk, like when you're on the Bulls and you're the leader and you're out there like sweating with those guys for 48 minutes plus overtime and things like that, and you're on the plane and all those things. When you're considered the best player of all time and you're in your like late 40s, early 50s now, and you go down and you talk to a 19-year-old and say, you're an absolute piece of like, and just, that's just entirely different. Like the relationship dynamic there just is not the same. And I could see how damaging that would be. Just like, wow, the best player of all time is telling me that I'm nowhere near, like, that I'm not good enough.
And especially if like you're a rookie, you're going to be thinking that most days, unless you're like just incredibly talented, you're going to have lots of moments where you're just like, everyone I'm playing is way better than I am.
Like, because guess what? They are.
They are. Like, it's the NBA. Like everyone, like even the scrubs are good, and you're a rookie, and the best competition that you played is NCAA, where every 4 or 5 games you play like an NBA caliber guy, and they have one guy on that team.
And if he may be a scrub position, right? Then like you're not even really playing that guy. I mean, you suck because you don't have the experience, and you're in the NBA to get it. Like, it's a jump from college to the NBA. There's what Donovan Mitchell did is insane. And Donovan Mitchell wouldn't have been able to do that if Gordon Hayward was still on the team and things like that. Like,
unless he got injured just like he did in real life.
That's fair. If he shatters his leg in game 1, then all of a sudden everything's different. But and that's why it's just interesting, right? Like, people are good at so many things. Like, and we talked about Westbrook, and we're on a complete, not even talking about Jazz tangent right now.
This is what you get with a monthly episode. We just need to let it all out.
And the off season doesn't help, but either. Okay, so if you were to say, of all the players in the NBA right now, which one is the most similar to Russell Westbrook in their play style?
I feel like I know the answer you want me to say.
Okay, what do you think, and what do you think I want you to say?
I'm thinking it's probably. I think my answer is probably going to be what you want me to say.
Okay.
Because I can't think of a great option right now, but probably like a Ja Morant.
Ja Morant, right? Is that a fair comparison, or do you think that's an unfair comparison?
In some ways yes, in some ways no.
Okay.
Because Ja Morant is crazy athletic, but he's not physical like Westbrook is.
Okay.
But I understand the point that you're trying to get to, where the ball has to go through Ja Morant.
Didn't he have the most points in the paint of any player last year? I'm pretty convinced that he led the league in points in the paint.
He's like a $180.
We could fact check me on that, but like, it's insane. And so I always have this moment with Ja Morant And I've just been needing to talk to someone about it. And I haven't broken down film. I haven't done anything. But is there anything that stands out to you when you look at Ja Morant and don't see a future for Ja Morant where he wins an MVP, where like he looks amazing, where he's on a couple good teams with the Grizzlies, like where he's one of the top players in the league, but never puts it together just because his style of play, while it's so much fun to watch, just isn't how you win in the NBA? Is that too far out there? Am I being overly cynical?
I definitely see it. And you look at other players, and you like another great comparison for Ja Morant is like Derrick Rose, where if Derrick Rose didn't get hurt, like he had an awesome team around him. But you may have seen something similar with Derrick Rose as well, where I think it all comes down to is I agree with you. I don't know if I see that guy in Ja Morant. Like you look at players like Luka, where he like when it comes to those moments, he makes it work. He makes it happen. And Ja Morant, you see him hustle, and he plays great. But like you saw in the Warriors series a little bit, and in the Pelican series a little bit before that, he wasn't always that guy. He couldn't close out key games. So if he, I think I see where you're coming from, and I would agree that he would, in order for him to win a championship, he probably needs to learn how to mature in the game of basketball and either learn how to take a step back and have a number one option take over, or learn like what LeBron does, learn how to lift all of his teammates. Because right now it kind of feels like even though he's putting 100% on the court, it feels like a lot of times his teammates are kind of lifting him, and he's not trying to get the full team involved.
Yeah, and again, like such a young player. I mean, that's his second season. Like, and again, a different person than Russell Westbrook. Like, I don't know who Ja Morant is as a person, but there's the possibility that he is much more willing to take a different role, to have different relationships with the teammates, and to make changes so that he's able to win better. And we'll see what happens. We'll see where things go. But I could see a future that I don't want to see, where it's just a what could have been, like, had you decided to play the game differently, what could have been.
So what I'm hearing you say is you're thinking there's going to be a 4-team trade where the Jazz end up with Zion Williamson, Ja Morant, and Luka Doncic, right?
I could not imagine. Were Ja Morant and Zion? No, it was the third pick. It was the guy on the Knicks. It was R.J. Barrett who played with Zion in college. I do not think you could have Zion and Ja on a team together. I don't think that would work. And obviously, we haven't got to see Zion play. We haven't got to see him play in a less ball dominant style. But as of right now, he's a really ball dominant guy. So it'll be interesting to see. Okay, I didn't find points in the paint per game. I did find paint touches. Nikola Jokic had the most paint touches. It looks like, I don't know how they're doing. I don't know how the NBA is doing this exactly. He had 108.2, followed by Ja Morant at 94.6, followed by Pascal Siakam at 92.7. So that's crazy to me.
Yeah, I'm curious how that's calculated. I'm trying to think of different ways, but.
And then Kyrie Irving's at 92.5. Are these aren't percentages? I don't know. Sorry. But Ja Morant was in the paint. Whether or not he was as physical in the paint, he was in the paint.
Nikola Jokic gets in the paint 108% of the time he touches the ball.
I mean, I guess I could see him no. And actually, if you want to go off on another tangent, you didn't include the Nuggets in a team that could win the chip.
I also didn't. I think I might have mentioned the Nuggets. Okay, I didn't mention the Clippers though, which I realized they could be if John Wall. I'm kind of bullish on John Wall. I hope he doesn't like prove me wrong there, but I think I'm excited to see what John Wall has to pull out this season.
Yeah, I think the big question is John Wall willing to take the fourth or fifth seat? You know, be fourth or fifth in line on a team to win a title.
And I think he's willing to. It's a whole nother question of can he? Can you find that balance of when to be aggressive and when to stand back? And that's not easy to find when you used to be the guy.
And it's super easy to say you're going to do it. Like, no one's going to look at you and say, yeah, of course, like I want to do anything to win a title. But all of a sudden, once you're in the moment, it's not easy to do.
That's one thing with Westbrook that I kind of respect. I don't think he ever said that he's going to take a step back. He's like, I'm just going to be myself. And it's like, that might not be the right option, but he's confident with his decision there.
Yeah, I respect it. I guess I respect it in the way that I respect having that level of self-confidence. But not being able to deal with that criticism, though, and thinking it's unwarranted. And to be fair, maybe he can deal with that criticism. But there are players like, John Stockton and Karl Malone where I look at it and I'm like, okay, they didn't win a title and like they tried and like things didn't work out and they didn't win. I have a hard time putting a player on that list like Russell Westbrook as one of the greatest players not to win a title when I feel like they've actively made bad decisions to prevent them from winning titles, to prevent him. Like, where I feel like that's not a things just didn't work out. That's like a no, the title wasn't a priority to me. So I guess I don't feel bad that he hasn't won a title, is what I'm saying. Yeah. Because I don't think he's prioritized it. So I'm like, I'm happy that you've made the decisions you want to make, but I don't feel bad that you haven't won a title.
I wonder if I was in the NBA, what would my mindset be around it? Because I don't think like every player would like to win a title, but it's like, where's it on your priority list? Because scoring 40 points a game is fun. Getting paid $40 million a year is pretty nice. You're not going to do both of those and win a title.
And then there's a question that comes into it. Like, did Jordan Poole win a title this year? Yes, he has a ring.
And like Dwight Howard's title with the Lakers.
Yeah.
Does that even count for his legacy?
And I feel like different looking at it for young players, where I'm like, does Jordan Poole feel like he's won a title? Or is he going to, like, how many titles does Steve Young had? I think he was on the bench for a couple of those Super Bowl wins with Joe Montana. But yeah, well, he was like on the plane for every game and stuff, and in the facility every day for practice.
He has a ring.
Like, did he win a title? And that's really a personal thing, right? Like, I think Horton Tucker was on the Lakers in the bubble. Does he have a title? Like, how do those players feel, and how does that impact their future decision making? And this is going off to the what type of player would you be? Has there ever been a Tom Brady in the NBA? And not that I can think of. Someone who's so good and takes multiple pay cuts to keep the team being that good. And again, like, earn the money you deserve. Like, the owners are making a lot of money. But
I don't know the history of Bill Russell, but I do know I know at least one contract negotiation. His stories are the best, by the way. If you haven't heard Bill Russell stories, go look them up. But he heard that Wilt Chamberlain got paid $1 million per year. And that was never heard of. That was the highest paid ever. So the Celtics, their negotiation style with Bill Russell was, how much do you want? And he said $1,001 just to beat out Chamberlain.
Just to beat out Wilt.
He definitely got his money, but at the same time, like, rules were kind of different back then. If he asked for $2 million, they probably would have given it to him. And so I think Bill Russell's the closest thing that I know of that could be to Tom Brady. And it doesn't really compare because Tom Brady's very modern sports, and Bill Russell was kind of establishing a league at that point.
I mean, and Brady got the bag in Tampa Bay and won, right? Like, and then looked like he was going to do it again last year. And then we'll see what happens this year. Like, he's got paid and won too, but the reason the Patriots were a dynasty is because of the fact that he was willing to take less. And it's not that I expect that from NBA players, but dang, it almost makes me want the Sixers to win this year. It almost makes me want the Sixers to win. We've not
seen a player do this in a long time, and then James Harden, everyone brands him as a selfish player, is the first player in a long time to say, "Hey, I'll take a pay cut for us to make it work." Yeah. Granted, he's still getting paid a lot of money. He took a pay cut enough to get one or two players on the roster.
Yeah. I mean, and from what I've heard speculation that there might have, been some under the table handshakes and that he might be getting a really nice extension if he does well.
The NBA has announced an investigation about the Harden and the PJ Tucker signings.
Oh, did they really?
Mm-hmm. So okay. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah. But again, if those things happen, I still respect him for taking less money this year, especially where he's had an injury history. He could have a really bad year and be done in the NBA. That's an option that could Carmelo Anthony just disappeared overnight. Players can be done and gone.
And it's not Carmelo Anthony, he didn't fall off because he wasn't talented. He was just in the wrong situation.
Yeah.
And it's because Carmelo Anthony on the Thunder, he was still Carmelo Anthony. He just didn't really have a spot on the Thunder. It was a bad situation for him. Just kind of sad. I liked Melo.
Yeah. And frankly, this conversation has shown me how exciting next year is going to be in the NBA. As long as, depending on what happens, you just kind of, think that there's 29 teams and just kind of forget about that one team in the West, that's, south of Idaho and north of Arizona.
The Nuggets.
The Nuggets, which is hard to do. And in my case, that's the team that I've been cheering for my whole life. But as a basketball fan, I'm super excited for this next year. As a Jazz fan, I struggle to sleep at night sometimes. But
it is
what it is.
Tanking's interesting, though, if you look at it from this perspective. If the Jazz go full tank mode.
Yeah, it is.
The seasons are really boring, but the off seasons are more exciting than for any other team, because draft is now your Super Bowl.
You get to watch the ping pong balls go. You get to watch.
You actually get to care about the lottery.
Then all of a sudden you pick up Dante Exum and you're like, this is going to be great. Defensive point guard. This will be amazing. Nothing happens. You get pick number 4, just falling just outside of the top 3, and you go pick up Enes Kanter, and you're like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to pick up a guy who can't shoot, has no offensive game, and is a power forward, and then watch the NBA all of a sudden, take a complete shift. But then you have all of a sudden pick 27 that you trade to the Nuggets turned out to be the best defensive center of all time. Hands down, bar none.
Here's one thing to think about, though, is so Jazz historically, they go after highest ceiling guys.
Yeah.
And Dante Exum, he had a high ceiling. He obviously didn't pan out. You can go through lots of high draft picks for the Jazz. They go for high ceiling guys. We now have Danny Ainge and we now have Ryan Smith. And so I think they're going to think about things way differently. And Danny Ainge is the guy who got Jason Tatum. Danny Ainge is the guy who got Jaylen Brown. So
were either of those picks that impressive, though?
He traded down to get Jason Tatum.
Oh, did he?
Mm-hmm. Okay. They had the number 1 pick. They traded it to the Sixers for Markelle, and the Sixers picked Markelle Fultz, and the Celtics got Jason Tatum.
And
that was a
right?
kind of risky move, but
I had missed that. No, trading down from the number 1 pick. That's a baller move.
Yeah.
I'll give him that. But looking back at that draft, who did you have in that draft? You had, was it Ball, Mitchell, and Tatum? Are those the 3 guys from the 20?
I want to pull it up real quick. Jason Tatum. Google, you should autofill. I hope Google listens to this podcast now.
2017 redraft. A riveting comment that you guys watch called Bank Sports for. We appreciate it, especially to the audio listeners who don't even get to look at us stare at our computer screens.
Yeah, this was so this is a draft that I have no recollection of because I was in Sweden at the time. But yeah, you have
no, it was
Lonzo, Tatum, De'Aaron Fox, Markkanen, Zach Collins, Donovan Mitchell, Bam.
Oh, this draft is so much more loaded looking at it. Now.
You had Kuzma down at 27. Our boy Frank Jackson.
Holy crap. Listen to this just redraft. So this is Yardbreaker or Yardbarker. This is their redraft in order. So they go Tatum number 1, Mitchell number 2, Adebayo number 3, De'Aaron Fox number 5. Where there's a lot of Fox. I'd love to see something good happen with Fox. Oh, did I say? Oh, no. He was the 5th pick. Sorry.
Okay, so they moved him up to 4.
Fox at 4. Josh Collins at 5, which again, like, Josh Collins could be a really nice piece. OG Anunoby at 6, who has a lot of potential if his injury history disappears. Markkanen at 7. Ball at 8. Jared Allen at 9.
Ball's a good starting point guard.
Ball. Yeah.
Yeah, to get him at 8, which he didn't actually go 8, but if he's the 8th best player in your draft, that's a pretty solid draft.
And again, injury history is big there right now. Like, he's struggling from an injury perspective, if I remember correctly. Jared Allen at number 9. Kyle Kuzma at number 10. Like, that's... And maybe it's just now that I'm paying attention more, but that's a nice top 10. I mean, not everyone's an all-star, but they're doing all right.
Yeah, that's a solid draft. So if imagine 2023 is like that, where you get 10 players where like the 10th best guy is Kuzma, where he's I don't know how you want to rate him, like a good starter or a really solid backup. Like, he's productive. Yeah.
And I guess, honestly, a lot of us looking at that list, at least maybe from my perspective, is when I go back and look at drafts in the 2000s, I wasn't paying enough attention to the NBA to know who the good role players are. So I look at someone picked up at 4 and I'm like, oh, they're a nobody. I haven't heard their name. But had I been paying attention, it might have been like, oh, yeah, that person's doing a great, 17 to 20 points a night. Great role player, great 3rd or 4th piece on a title team that I just haven't heard of because their names aren't in the history books.
I had a moment like that recently with it's the Duke star who played on the Dream Team. Do you remember who I'm talking about?
I do not.
Oh, okay. My Dream Team roster. But so I always thought of him as an excellent. It's not the Jason Tatum is not on the Dream Team. But I always thought of him as a really good college player, and then he just flamed out in the NBA. And then I looked him up on Basketball Reference, and he had 4 or 5 seasons where he averaged 24 points a game. And so it's you hear these narratives of players, and then you go look back at their stats, and you realize, oh, he wasn't a nobody. He was a actually good player. Christian Laettner.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, 24 points a game back then, that's crazy. That's over a quarter of the points your team is going to be scoring in that game.
I lied. I adjusted it for modern pace.
Oh, you would? Okay.
He most his career, he averaged 12.8, but the first 6 years, he averaged between 14 and 18.
Okay.
With 8 boards a game. So
I like that.
That's not a scrub. That's a good player.
That adjustment's absolutely necessary with the change in the league. Going from, the average score being in the low 90s to all of a sudden being almost 110.
And now you have all-stars who are or all-star snubs where they're scoring 25 points a game.
Yeah.
And it's those were the best. That was the scoring leader back in the 2000s.
It's a crazy game. Well, anything else you want to add before we wrap up the month of July?
If you got this far and you're watching this and Mitchell's already been traded, ignore everything we've said. We'll have to make another episode next month.
I was just going to say this. how much do you bet that now, because we made this episode, that, within like the next 9 minutes, so 8 p.m. Mountain Time on July 29th, that you just get the Woj bomb of like...
To check my Twitter to make sure this hasn't happened.
All of it, yeah, we put our phones on Do Not Disturb, and actually right when we started with recording, everything changed, and we could have put together a great What Does This Mean for Utah podcast, and like been at the top of YouTube, but all of a sudden it's like, oh no, we just spent 40 minutes, making a podcast that was out of date when we hit the record button.
That would have been our luck.
Well, thank you guys to everyone who's listening. Please smash that like button. We do appreciate it. Like, we love making these for you guys, and we love when more people are able to see them. But thank you guys again, and go Jazz!